Welcome everybody to this Sunday morning service here at Salt and Light Christian Church. The story that I will be telling you all on the 4th of July weekend, I thought it would be appropriate to tell the story of our national anthem. So, the national anthem was written by a man named Francis Scott Key in the year 1814, during the War of 1812. The war went on for a couple of years. At the time, the British had once again attacked the United States and had even captured the Capitol in Washington, D.C. They had burned down the White House as well as several other government buildings. And this was a crippling defeat for the Americans. During this war, many prisoners were taken by the British and held on warships. One such prisoner was a renowned doctor who had many friends and neighbors that had petitioned the government for his freedom and his release, to the point that even the president sent Francis to go and negotiate for this doctor's release. And so Francis went and he got on a boat, a small vessel, and sailed out to meet the British on their warships. And he boarded the British warship in the hopes of negotiating the release of the prisoners. And after a week of deliberating back and forth in these negotiations, they finally came to an agreement where the British had agreed to release this doctor as well as several other prisoners. And that was the good news. However, the bad news was they refused to release these prisoners until after their attack on Fort McHenry, to maintain the element of surprise. Fort McHenry, for those of you who don't know, is a prominent military fort right at the peninsula sticking out into the ocean right at the Bay of Baltimore. And Baltimore at this time was one of the largest cities in the United States. And so Britain's plan was to once again use their overwhelming naval firepower to bombard this fort and utterly destroy it, and then send their smaller war vessels into the bay to ransack the city. On September 13th, 1814, the British began their attack on Fort McHenry. And their warships were quite a ways out into the ocean. They were off the coast, and they were using their cannons to lob bombs at the fort. And the fort's firepower could not reach the ships, and so they had no way to return fire. All they could do was defend from this onslaught. And while the attack continued all day, evening came and the sun began to set. And Francis was stuck on this warship with nothing to do but watch as the British bombarded Fort McHenry. And as the sun set, Francis saw the last glimpse of the American flag flying over the fort. This flag specifically was quite large. It was bigger than most of the flags that they would use. The United States had commissioned a widow to make this flag specifically for the British to be able to see it flying in their vessels all the way out in the ocean. And so this huge flag flew as the sun set, and the bombs exploded all around the fort. During that night, sleep eluded Francis. I'm sure you can imagine why. And he couldn't help but wonder as he watched this onslaught, was the flag still there? Every once in a while, a bomb would explode, giving a red glimmer of light to reveal that the flag was indeed still flying. And come next morning, as the sun began to rise, Francis could see that that flag was indeed still there. The men of Fort McHenry, there were about 1,000 men stationed there, had defended the fort against this onslaught, to the point that only 4 casualties occurred during this attack. And after over 24 hours of continuous bombardment, the British decided to pull back, realizing that the fort still stood and that their attack had failed. After this, they kept their word to Francis and agreed and released the prisoners. And that day, on September 14th, 1814, Francis Scott Key left that British warship with the prisoners he came to free, as well as a poem that he had wrote on the envelope, the back of an envelope, the letter that he had, that would go on to become known as the Star-Spangled Banner. We'll sing the song later today as the praise team sings. And when we do, pay attention to the words and try to imagine yourself there with Francis on that warship with the prisoners as they saw the bombardment against their fellow countrymen, and the joy and hope that they had the next morning when they saw that flag still waving. So thank you. Let's bring the music up.